Gilbert, Arizona is home to a criminal street gang called the Gilbert Goons, who have been wreaking havoc on the town's streets in recent years. Numerous members have been accused of violent crimes, including several teenagers. One such individual is 20-year-old Jacob Pennington, who was charged in connection with 2 assaults that occurred in 2022 and 2023. During an interview with ABC 15 Arizona, Pennington's mother denied that her son was a member of the Gilbert Goons or that the gang even exists, but prosecutors insisted otherwise. During the first assault, which occurred in Maricopa County, a teenage boy was robbed and assaulted by a mob of fellow adolescents while sitting in his car outside an In-N-Out restaurant. The attackers pulled the victim's car keys out of the ignition and struck him in the back of the head with brass knuckles, splitting his scalp open so badly that it had to be stapled back together. During the more recent assault, which occurred in Pinal County, Pennington was accused of repeatedly striking and humiliating a teenager who was trying to back away from him. According to the victim's mother, Pennington led a mob that attacked her son in a completely unprovoked fashion. She accused Pennington of whipping her son with a belt and hurling racial slurs at him while he pleaded to know why he was being assaulted. In June of 2024, Pennington pleaded guilty to 2 counts of aggravated assault. In connection with both incidents, he was sentenced to 3 years of probation and promised to follow the law, but was arrested just hours later for underage drinking. Prosecutors filed a motion to revoke Pennington's probation, but the judge continued his probation and sentenced him to 5 weekends in jail. Number 20. Jermaine Owens. While responding to a domestic disturbance in April of 2023, police in Shreveport, Louisiana confronted 40-year-old Jermaine Owens, who was accused of pointing a gun at his wife, shoving her to the ground and threatening to kill her. Owens attempted to flee on foot while being questioned by responding officers, but he didn't get far before he was tased and subdued. A look into the suspect's background revealed a previous conviction for domestic abuse battery, which banned him by default from possessing a gun. He also had previous felony convictions for armed robbery, attempted armed robbery, and drug possession. Authorities charged Owens accordingly with domestic abuse, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm or carrying a concealed weapon by a person convicted of domestic abuse battery. In January of 2024, a jury found him guilty of the gun charge along with 1 count of simple assault. Due to his status as a habitual offender, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Number 19. Adrian Espinoza. In August of 2023, a woman heard a strange noise coming from outside her bedroom during a visit from a male companion at her apartment in McAllen, Texas. She went to investigate the noise and was shocked to find her ex, Adrian Espinoza, in her kitchen. According to police, Espinoza choked the woman in a jealous rage and stomped on her foot. He eventually left but was accused of returning the following night with his mother, who allegedly assaulted the victim. Espinoza returned to the property hours later and smashed the woman's kitchen window with a pipe. The victim later told police that Espinoza entered her apartment again and begged her to leave with him. She persuaded him to leave and called the police. Just a month earlier, a judge had issued an order of protection banning Espinoza from going near the woman following a previous domestic incident. Following the more recent assaults, he was charged with violating a protective order and assaulting or stalking. He posted a $20,000 bond and was released, only to land back in custody later that day on a burglary charge. Records show that Espinoza is not currently in custody, but he has been arrested several times in recent months, with his most recent arrest being in May of 2024 for assaulting a family member. Number 18. Keith Gibson. 41-year-old Keith Gibson was paroled in 2020 after serving 13.5 years of a 20-year prison sentence for manslaughter in Delaware. In April of 2021, he was accused of violating the terms of his release by going out of state without permission. Gibson's probation officer urged the court to send him back to prison for the remaining 6.5 years of his original sentence, but the judge released him. By then, prosecutors claimed that Gibson was already more than 2 months into a 5-month crime and killing spree, which ended with as many as 8 people dead. The murders started in February of 2021 with the slaying of Gibson's own mother, 54-year-old mother Christine Gibson, at her workplace in Philadelphia. The remaining murders were committed after the judge overseeing Gibson's probation violation case ruled to release him rather than send him back to prison. In May of 2021, 28-year-old Leslie Ruiz Basilio was fatally gunned down in a robbery gone wrong at the Metro PCS store where she worked in Ellesmere, Delaware. Nearly a month later, 42-year-old Ronald Wright was murdered during a street robbery in Wilmington. 40-year-old Dunkin' Donuts manager Christine Lugo was shot in the head at one of the store's location in Philly while opening up for the day, and a Wilmington store clerk named Bilal Al-Mansouri survived after being shot. In June of 2021, Delaware prosecutors charged Gibson with 4 murders, 1 count of attempted murder for shooting Al-Mansouri, 4 counts of first-degree robbery, 9 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and 1 count each of conspiracy, motor vehicle theft, wearing body armor during the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a prohibited person. The case came to a long-awaited end in March of 2024 when a jury found Gibson guilty of 22 charges, including the murders of Ronald Wright and Leslie Ruiz Basilio. Taking his habitual offender status into consideration, the judge sentenced him to 7 life terms plus 296 years in prison, ensuring that he'll never step foot in the free world again. Number 17. Mia Christman. 18-year-old Mia Christman was sentenced to 10 years in prison for armed robbery in 2013 after participating in a violent crime spree across Los Angeles. Throughout the trial, her defense attorneys had argued that she was the victim of abuse at the hands of her 34-year-old pimp, but the court ultimately determined that a decade-long sentence was appropriate. Christman appealed her case, and in 2021, Judge Erica Ballou vacated her sentence, citing her previous attorney's lackluster performance, childhood trauma, and the fact that both of her parents are convicted felons. During the hearing, the court heard testimony from Clark County District Court Judge Stephanie Miley, who imposed the original 10-year sentence against Christman. Miley said that she felt Christman was trying to game the system after being given several chances to stay out of custody and failing to show up in court. Clark County District Attorney Steve Wilson echoed Miley's sentiments, telling the court that Christman had failed to deliver on her promises to cooperate against her co-conspirators. Ballou nevertheless opted to rule in the defendant's favor, and after serving 6 years behind bars, Christman was freed. She relocated to California, where she enrolled in a barber apprentice program and became a mother. Prosecutors fought for Christman to be sent back to prison to finish serving her original term, and the Nevada Supreme Court ruled in their favor. In a rare act of defiance toward a higher court, Ballou was ordered to send Christman back to prison twice, but refused. In early 2024, Christman attempted to obtain a pardon from the Nevada Pardons Board, but was rejected. The Supreme Court removed Ballou from her case, and she was ultimately left with no choice but to return to prison and finish her sentence. Christman, who is now 30 years old, turned herself into authorities in May. The Clark County District Attorney's Office is now accusing Judge Ballou of 5 ethics violations and is fighting to get her removed from all criminal cases until the complaints against her are squared away. Number 16. Kenneth Copeland. Jeffrey Lamar Williams, better known as the rapper Young Thug, has faced a mounting pile of legal problems in recent years for alleged crimes dating as far back as 2012. In 2022, he and 27 other accused gang members were charged in a 56-count indictment for violating Georgia's RICO Act. In addition to the racketeering crimes, the defendants are also facing drug and gun-related charges. Since his arrest, Williams has been held without bond at the Cobb County Jail. The trial against the rapper and 5 of his co-defendants began in January of 2023 and is ongoing. In June of 2024, a witness named Kenneth Copeland, aka Lil Woody, was called to the stand to testify. When a prosecutor asked him how old he was, he replied, "I'm grown." He refused to answer any further questions by attempting to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, despite being granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. Copeland became part of the Young Thug case following his arrest in October of 2021 for having a loaded gun in his car during a traffic stop. He reportedly volunteered to share information and told investigators that he could help elicit a confession from Young Thug. After making it clear that he was not going to talk in court, Copeland was arrested on the stand and held in willful contempt. Young Thug's defense attorney filed a mistrial immediately following the incident, but the motion was denied. The outcome of the unusually lengthy case remains to be seen. Number 15. Marion Reyes. In May of 2023, a woman who was wanted in Las Vegas ended up in custody after commenting on a Facebook post appealing to the public for help finding her. 35-year-old Marion Reyes was accused of removing her ankle monitor and skipping court in a felony DUI case, prompting law enforcement to reach out to 8 News Now investigators for help getting the word out that they were looking for her. Much to their surprise, Reyes herself commented on the post. She denied cutting the ankle monitor off, claiming that an officer had removed it when she turned herself in and that she had been released without it. In response to the comment, Las Vegas Metro's Traffic Bureau responded, "Marion Reyes, then why not turn yourself in now? Let's get this sorted out tonight." At the time, Reyes was mandated to a treatment program following her 7th DUI. She was also sentenced to home confinement and made aware that if she got another DUI, it would come with automatic prison time. In exchange for her participation in the treatment program, the judge had agreed to consolidate Reyes' 3 most recent DUI charges into one. At the urging of law enforcement, Reyes turned herself in after the Facebook comment exchange. 3 months later, she was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison. Reyes apologized to the community and the court for her admittedly selfish actions, and she didn't disagree when the judge reminded her of how lucky she is that her drunk driving never killed anyone. During a jailhouse interview with 8 News Now, she said that she chose incarceration over the rehabilitation program because it will enable her to eventually see her children again. Following her release, Reyes hopes to move away from Las Vegas and start over in a place where she feels she'll be more likely to maintain her sobriety. Number 14. Johnny Mims. In one of the more unusual cases you'll learn about today, police in Birmingham, Alabama, tased high school band director Johnny Mims when he disobeyed their orders to stop playing music after a football game in September of 2023. The game had ended about 20 minutes earlier when Mims was told to stop, but he continued conducting the band until the end of the song. An altercation ensued between Mims and the officers, who shocked him 3 times in front of dozens of students. Body cam footage of the confrontation showed an officer telling Mims to stop the music. He told the officers to get out of his face and said that the band was finishing up their last song. When an officer warned Mims that he could go to jail, he responded with 2 thumbs up and said, "That's cool." As soon as the song ended, the officers arrested him. The police accused Mims of shoving an officer while refusing to put his hands behind his back and charged him with disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and harassment. Mims adamantly denied the allegation and accused the police of using excessive force. He was suspended from his job amid an internal investigation, but was allowed to return to work 2 months after the incident. Unfortunately, much of the physical confrontation between Mims and the police is obstructed from view in the body cam footage. Later on in the video, an officer could be heard expressing his fear that the incident would foster tensions and distrust between law enforcement and the local community. He told Mims all you had to do was comply, but Mims maintained that he did nothing wrong. The beleaguered band leader's legal team attempted to get the case dismissed in court, but the motion was denied. A trial date was set for March of 2024, but updates have not been forthcoming, indicating that the case is likely ongoing. Number 13. Lawrence Pierre II. 22-year-old rookie police officer Shateri Payne was shot dead outside her Shreveport, Louisiana home as she prepared to go to work one day in January of 2019. Investigators traced the murder to her live-in boyfriend, Travion DeMarcus Anderson, and 2 of Anderson's cousins, Glenn Montreal Frierson and Lawrence Pierre II. According to prosecutors, Frierson dropped Pierre off near the crime scene shortly before the shooting and picked him up nearby right afterward. Frierson, Pierre, and Anderson were all charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Pierre pleaded guilty to second-degree murder at the 11th hour to avoid a trial. In exchange for his guilty plea, prosecutors dropped the conspiracy charge. He was sentenced to life without parole. On the 9th day of Anderson and Frierson's trial, Pierre was called to the stand to testify against his former co-defendants. After he sat down, his former defense attorney informed the court that he was unwilling to testify and attempted to invoke Pierre's Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The judge ruled that Pierre did not have the right to invoke the Fifth Amendment and allowed the questioning to proceed, but Pierre refused to cooperate, repeatedly stating, "I prefer not to answer after each question." He continued saying, "I prefer not to answer," even after being told that he had no Fifth Amendment rights. Left with no other choice, the parties involved in the case eventually gave up on their attempts to question Pierre, and he was returned to jail to begin his life sentence. Frierson was ultimately acquitted of all charges, while Anderson was found guilty and sentenced to life plus 30 years. Number 12. Mahailya Pryer. Mahailya Pryer of Springfield, Missouri was among the more than 1,400 people who were charged in connection with the January 6, 2021 riot against the U.S. Capitol. In May of 2022, she pleaded guilty to one count of parading, demonstrating, or picketing in a Capitol building and was sentenced to 45 days in jail, followed by 3 years of federal probation. She was also ordered to undergo inpatient substance abuse treatment and to take regular drug tests. In May of 2023, Pryor was arrested on 8 probation violation charges. She was accused of possessing methamphetamine on 4 separate occasions, failing to attend substance abuse treatment, and failing to look for a job. The judge released Pryor to house arrest as she awaited a hearing to determine whether or not her probation would be revoked. In the meantime, she was allowed to leave home for medical care and substance abuse treatment and was ordered to get a job. A few months later, prosecutors charged Pryor with 5 more probation violations, including failing to undergo substance abuse treatment, refusal to submit to drug testing, and possession of fentanyl and methamphetamine. She was hit with additional violations in December of 2023 for failing to notify her probation officer of her new address after moving and failing to make herself available for supervision. Pryor fought to end her probation early, arguing in court that it's unlawful for someone convicted of a petty offense to be sentenced to both prison and probation. The court rejected her argument, but she won a victory in the long run when the judge sentenced her to 30 days in jail, followed by no further probation. Number 11. Melodie Portia Clayborne. In February of 2024, a 23-year-old accused drunk driver named Melodie Portia Clayborne was arrested in connection with an alleged crime spree in Collindale, Pennsylvania. The events began shortly before 2 o'clock in the morning when Clayborne's Nissan Maxima struck 2 parked vehicles and a utility pole. The driver fled the scene on foot and was later identified as Clayborne through footage which showed the suspect running away. Shortly after her arrest, Clayborne requested medical attention and was taken to the hospital. A short while later, emergency room workers dialed 911 and reported that Clayborne was refusing medical treatment and had barricaded herself in a bathroom. Officers from 3 jurisdictions responded to the scene, where Clayborne continued to act combative and was accused of kicking a cop. She was taken back to the police station, where she was booked into custody on suspicion of assault on a law enforcement officer, 2 counts of simple assault, driving under the influence, harassment, criminal mischief, and causing an accident with damage. Bail was set at $75,000 and records show that she has been bonded out. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 10. Nikkita Brown. A Chicago woman named Nikkita Brown was walking her dog in Lincoln Park in 2021 when a police officer, later identified as Bruce Dyker, told her that the park was closed and instructed her to leave. Body cam footage would later show Brown cautiously backing away and repeatedly telling Dyker to give her some space. Diker continued to walk toward Brown while yelling that she was going in the opposite direction of the exit and threatening to handcuff her if she didn't leave the park. While walking toward the exit, Brown stopped momentarily and turned around with her phone in her hand. Diker attempted to grab the phone and tackled her to the ground, knocking her out of her shoes. The ensuing struggle lasted for at least a minute before Diker allowed Brown to leave the park. In what Brown's lawyer described as a classic case of racial profiling, she accused Diker of attacking her for no reason. Diker resigned from the police force in May of 2022 and was charged the following month with misconduct and aggravated battery in public. According to Brown's attorney, Diker had been accused of misconduct at least 24 times throughout his 20-year law enforcement career. Despite his checkered history, the prosecutor dropped all charges in 2023. A civil lawsuit against Diker for excessive force, unreasonable seizure, false arrest, and willful and wanton battery is ongoing. Number 9. Jacqueline Rodriguez. A Florida woman named Jacqueline Rodriguez spent her 40th birthday in police custody after she was accused of drunkenly assaulting a police officer outside a Publix store in Boca Raton. According to reports, police responded to the store in October of 2016 after receiving a report about an intoxicated customer who needed to be removed. Rodriguez was trying to buy wine when officers told her to leave the store. She received a warning not to come back but told the police that she was going to come back into the store and buy her wine. An officer grabbed Rodriguez with the intention of arresting her for violating the trespassing warning. She resisted, biting and kicking the cops as they fought to subdue her, and she continued acting disrespectful and combative at a nearby hospital where the police took her for medical clearance. After using the bathroom at the emergency room, Rodriguez reportedly exited with her pants down and once again began to kick and flail around as officers tried to get her under control. She was eventually booked into custody on suspicion of resisting arrest, assault on a law enforcement officer, and battery on a law enforcement officer. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 8. Kyle Berry. Early one morning in June of 2024, a 911 caller in Xenia, Ohio, reported that there was a man pointing a gun at them and shooting in the parking lot of their apartment complex. As a pair of responding officers arrived at the scene, they observed 23-year-old Kyle Berry coming around the corner of a building with a semi-automatic pistol pointed at them. A third officer exited his patrol car and ordered Berry to drop the weapon, but he failed to comply and continued aiming the gun at the cops. One of the officers opened fire, injuring the accused gunman, and Berry was taken to the hospital for treatment before being booked into custody at the Greene County Jail on 2 counts of felonious assault. He's currently awaiting his next court date from behind bars, with bail set at $500,000. Number 7. Shelley Dinis Moore. 46-year-old Shelley Dinis Moore of Amarillo, Texas, was sentenced to 4 years of probation in 2019 after pleading guilty to stealing a woman's identifying information. In March of 2020, prosecutors filed to revoke her probation after she failed to report to her probation officer 2 months in a row. Moore was also accused of failing to notify her PO of her new address after moving out of a halfway house. She served 30 days in jail and her probation was continued. In March of 2022, prosecutors filed a second motion to revoke Moore's probation for using methamphetamine and failing to check in with her PO for 3 months straight. She pleaded guilty to the violations and the judge extended her probation by 2 years. A third motion to revoke Moore's probation was filed in November of 2023 after she once again failed to check in with her PO for several months. Authorities issued a warrant for her arrest, but she remained at large for several months until May of 2024, when she was captured following an appeal to the public for information on her whereabouts. Records show that she has since served her sentence and is now a free woman. Number 6. Kylee Danus. During what began as a routine traffic stop late one Saturday night during the fall of 2022, police in Boardman, Ohio, pulled over a driver for stopping in the middle of an intersection. Inside the vehicle were 22-year-old Kylee Danus, who was wearing a police officer Halloween costume, and 34-year-old Timothy Wilkes. Danus claimed that she and Wilkes were on their way home from a movie and admitted that she did not have a valid driver's license due to outstanding citations and fines. Wilkes refused to hand over his ID, and Danus told officers that he had a warrant out for his arrest. But she claimed that the warrant was invalid because the charges were based on false allegations she had made against Wilkes. After confirming the warrant, police took Wilkes into custody. Danus remained uncooperative and became combative as officers handcuffed her and placed her in the back of a police cruiser. She was accused of trying to kick an officer and was charged with obstructing official business, resisting arrest, and assault on a peace officer. While the outcome of the case is unclear, records show that Danus was arrested in Newcastle, Pennsylvania in May of 2024 for an accident involving property damage, driving with a suspended or revoked license, and careless driving. The more recent case is ongoing. Number 5. British drug gang brags on social media. In 2017, Liam Wall, Lee Smith, Connor Morse, and Christopher El Jafari were accused of running the busiest drug supply line in Cardiff, Wales, which raked in thousands of dollars per day. The defendants moved cannabis, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, peddling the drugs to customers who contacted them via a designated phone number that was used specifically for taking orders. Law enforcement first became suspicious of the group when Wall attempted to cash in more than $2,500 worth of coins at a change machine. In September of 2015, an investigation followed, leading to the execution of multiple search warrants. During the searches, police recovered more than $28,000 worth of drugs, including nearly 4.5 pounds of methamphetamine and over 2 pounds of cannabis. Authorities arrested 3 of the dealers, Wall, Morse, and El Jafari, during a traffic stop while they were on their way back from a resupply run to Liverpool. El Jafari told the arresting officers that the group had just taken a road trip in the mountains, and all 3 suspects claimed to have no knowledge of the nearly $15,000 worth of drugs that were found in the vehicle. A search of the suspects' phones turned up incriminating photos and videos, including pictures of the men posing with money and drugs. All 4 defendants admitted to conspiring to supply Class A and Class B drugs and received prison sentences ranging from 3 years and 7 months to 9 years and 7 months. Number 4. Midlands Drug Gang. A British drug gang known as the J-Line supplied nearly 400 customers across Birmingham and Warwickshire with cocaine and cannabis before a police investigation interrupted their operation in 2020 and 2021. The supply line was run by Shamraz and Amrez Alam, who took over after the original leaders, Shakil Khan and Mohammed Asim, got busted and went to prison. The ringleader, Shamraz, nicknamed Escobar, and his second-in-command, Amrez, bought the operation from Khan and Asim for $50,000. The dealers made the regrettable mistake of flaunting their ill-gotten wealth on social media, where they posted photos of themselves with large amounts of money. Searches of properties connected to the gang turned up hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, drugs, guns, and ammunition. The original leader, Shakil Khan, is serving a 10-year sentence, while Mohammed Asim received a 12-month suspended prison sentence. Shamraz Escobar Alam and Amrez Alam pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply Class A drugs and were found guilty of gun possession. They were both sentenced to 17.5 years in prison. 2 so-called foot soldiers, Mudassir Hussain and Waqar Ali, were also charged for their roles in the operation, which involved packaging and moving the drugs. Hussain was sentenced to more than 4 years in prison, while Ali received a 14-month suspended sentence. Shamraz Alam's girlfriend, Valentina Dobre, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply Class A drugs and was awaiting sentencing, according to the most recent available updates on the case. Number 3. James Justice. In January of 2021, Pueblo, Colorado police officer Anthony Cordova responded to a call about a man threatening people with a gun outside of a Motel 6. Upon arriving in the area, he spotted the suspect, 40-year-old James Justice, in a parking lot and attempted to confront him. Justice, who has been described by authorities as a habitual offender, pulled a handgun and fired multiple shots in Cordova's direction, prompting the officer to return fire. Neither man was hit, and Justice ran from the scene, sparking a foot chase through a nearby mobile home park. Justice exchanged gunfire with pursuing officers several times before he was captured a half hour later. He was shot in the thigh during the chase but survived his injuries and was charged with over a dozen crimes, including 4 counts each of attempted first-degree murder, first-degree assault, and reckless endangerment. At the time of his arrest, Justice was out on bond for assaulting a peace officer. He was held without bail after the violent police chase. Prosecutors offered a plea deal to settle Justice's criminal cases, but he rejected it because he didn't think it was lenient enough. He filed a motion urging the judge to force the prosecution and defense into a mediation process in an attempt to negotiate another resolution. The judge ruled in Justice's favor and instructed both parties to enter mediation, but the prosecution appealed the decision. The Colorado Supreme Court reversed the ruling after determining that the district court lacked the authority to force the mediation process. When the case finally went to trial in 2024, Justice was found guilty of the attempted murder, assault, and reckless endangerment charges. He is currently awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for September of 2024. Number 2. Shannon Douglas. While investigating a reported disturbance in a residential neighborhood in February of 2018, police in High Point, North Carolina, apprehended a woman named Shannon Douglas for trespassing. She was reportedly combative towards officers during her arrest, resulting in additional charges for assault inflicting serious injury on a government official, 2 counts of misdemeanor assault on a government official, malicious conduct by a prisoner, and resist and delay. Douglas received treatment at a local hospital and was subsequently booked into jail with bond set at $25,000. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 1. Erik Cantu. In October of 2022, 25-year-old rookie police officer James Brennand spotted a car in a McDonald's parking lot in San Antonio, Texas, that he believed had fled from law enforcement the previous night. He approached the vehicle where a teenager named Erik Cantu was eating a hamburger in the driver's seat. Brennand opened the driver's side door and instructed Cantu to exit the car. Cantu looked confused as he placed his hands on the steering wheel and asked why he was being ordered out of his vehicle. Without offering an explanation, Brennand fired 5 shots into the car with his service weapon, terrified for his life. Cantu reversed out of his parking spot and pulled out of the lot while Brennand fired several more shots at the back of his car. Cantu had been shot several times and spent several weeks on life support with injuries to his stomach, diaphragm, lungs, liver, and arms. Even after his release from the hospital, he faced a lengthy recovery and he still has a bullet lodged near his heart because doctors decided it would be too risky to try removing it. An internal investigation found multiple inconsistencies between Brennan's narrative of what had happened and what his body cam showed. He failed to identify himself as a police officer as he approached Cantu's car, and he was never struck by the vehicle despite claiming he had been. Police Chief William McManus told News 4 San Antonio that he couldn't defend Brennan's actions during the traffic stop. He further clarified that there may have been some contact between Brennan and Cantu, but that it did not justify the officer's decision to open fire on the teen. Following the internal investigation, Brennan was fired and charged with multiple crimes. Several of the charges were dropped, but he is still facing a charge of deadly conduct with a firearm. The case is scheduled to go to trial in November of 2024, and Cantu is in the process of suing the city of San Antonio in civil court. While responding to a call in Wellington, Florida's Black Diamond neighborhood in May of 2024, Palm Beach County deputies found married couple Tara Marie Jones and Taylor Glenn Jones dead in pools of blood with multiple gunshot wounds. A witness had tried rendering first aid to the victims when the shooter approached and said, "Don't worry, I shot them both," before calmly walking away from the scene. Later identified as the Joneses' neighbor, 63-year-old Norman Scott, the accused killer told police that the couple had attacked him, despite the absence of any weapons lying near their bodies to suggest that this might have been the case. The deadly encounter reportedly stemmed over a disagreement over property boundaries and the placement of a basketball hoop. But surveillance video from Scott's home seemed to contradict his version of events. In the footage, Scott could be seen waving Taylor Jones over to talk, then getting in the victim's face while Taylor remained calm and composed. Scott then pulled a gun and shot Taylor multiple times before turning the weapon toward Tara, who was a few dozen feet away. Tara tried to run but was mercilessly gunned down. As he walked away, the shooter stopped and fired 2 more bullets into Taylor's head, as if to make extra sure that he was no longer alive. Scott remains held without bail on 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder with a firearm. He pleaded not guilty and is awaiting his next court date, which is scheduled for October the 8th of 2024. Number 14. Milena Bogojevska. In a disturbing act of violence that even many hardened criminals could never bring themselves to commit, an 85-year-old Australian widow was beaten to death at her Flemington, Victoria home in July of 2024. 2 days later, a pair of fishermen found the heavily bruised body of 85-year-old Lolene Whitehand in the Maribyrnong River, with plastic bags over her head and tied around her legs. Whitehead lived alone at the residence where she was killed following the death of her husband about a decade earlier. She was well liked in her community, leaving most local residents horrified and sickened by the news of her murder. Investigators traced the crime to the victim's neighbor, 49-year-old Milena Bogojevska, who stands accused of breaking into Whitehead's home and stealing $2,000 worth of jewelry and cash before brutally taking her life. Bogojevska remains detained without bail while the investigation continues and is due back in court in late November. Number 13. Wendell Earl Popejoy. A years-long feud between 2 households in Nunica, Michigan, reached its boiling point the day after Christmas in 2017, when 63-year-old Wendell Popejoy approached 59-year-old Sheila Bong from behind while she was snow-blowing her driveway and shot her in the head with a revolver. The rivalry between Popejoy and Bong dated back to at least 2 years earlier in 2015. During 2016 alone, police responded to at least 13 reported disputes between the warring neighbors. Many of the complaints from both parties seemed trivial and included things like pets trespassing onto one another's property and one of the parties' vehicles blocking a shared easement. In multiple previous incident reports from before the shooting, deputies had described Bong as irrational and explosive, leading to suspicions on more than one occasion that she was the aggressor. Bong also had problems with other neighbors, further pointing toward a pattern of hostility that perhaps made her difficult to get along with. Speaking with the Detroit News after the shooting, 81-year-old Donetta Gould said that Bong had recently approached her while she was walking her dog and said, "I hope you fall and break your hip." This was typical behavior, according to Gould and others, including a local resident who had obtained an order of protection against Bong. On the day that Popejoy pulled the trigger, Bong was purposely blowing snow in people's driveways, and it wasn't her first time doing it. And while being annoyed certainly doesn't legally justify shooting your neighbor, this seems to be what triggered a violent reaction from Popejoy, who had no criminal record prior to the fatal encounter. Some community members rallied around Popejoy following his arrest, but most seem to understand that the law is the law. Authorities charged him with open murder and a jury ultimately convicted him of first-degree murder, which carries an automatic sentence of life without parole in the state of Michigan. Popejoy appealed his case, arguing that he acted in the heat of passion and therefore deserved a lesser conviction of manslaughter, but the court affirmed the previous finding that he had acted with intent and in a premeditated fashion, and the original ruling was upheld. Number 12. Sarah Sands. After learning that 3 of her sons had been targeted by a seemingly trustworthy neighbor in 2014, single mother of 5, Sarah Sands stabbed 77-year-old Michael Pleasted to death in his East London apartment. She initially had no idea that the senior citizen had over 24 prior abuse convictions spanning 3 decades, or that Pleasted had served prison time for his past crimes. The elderly pervert had managed to go unnoticed within the community by changing his name. Sarah's children told her about Pleasted's abuse, and the police arrested him, but he denied the allegations and accused the victims of lying. Shortly after learning that Pleasted had been released on bail, Sands entered his flat and plunged a knife into him 8 times. She later claimed that she didn't mean to kill Pleasted and was convicted of manslaughter based on the court's conclusion that she lost control of her emotions. Sands was initially sentenced to 3.5 years in prison, but the sentence was increased to 7.5 years after the judge determined that she had failed to seek help for Pleasted as he lay dying in his apartment. She was released after serving 4 years and has since made it her mission to fight for tighter restrictions on predators who change their identities, which is one way they managed to fly under the radar of a background check. In hindsight, Sands expressed remorse for her actions, but her sons told BBC News that they believe she did the right thing and that Pleasted was never going to stop targeting vulnerable victims as long as he was alive. Number 11. Cynthia Ellen Ming. Shortly before midnight one evening in September of 2022, police were summoned to the Lacey Lakeview, Texas home of 45-year-old Angie Melissa Moore, who told 911 operators that her neighbor was trying to break into her residence. Moore said she had a gun and that she was prepared to defend herself, but the intruder nevertheless managed to wrestle the weapon away from her and shot her in the head. As they arrived at the scene, responding officers saw Moore's neighbor, 50-year-old Cynthia Ellen Ming, running away from the crime scene, naked and covered in blood. An officer tried to subdue her with a taser, but it had no effect. Ming was eventually apprehended by multiple cops and placed in the back of a police cruiser while the investigation began. By the time emergency responders entered Moore's house, she had succumbed to her injuries. While receiving treatment for some cuts she sustained from breaking the victim's window, Ming reportedly told hospital employees that she had murdered her neighbor for killing her dog. A police spokesperson speculated that the allegation about Moore killing Ming's dog was untrue, noting that the victim was a known animal lover. According to the most recent updates on the case, Ming remains in custody at the McLennan County Jail on a capital murder charge, with bail set at $1 million. Number 10. Zak Moyer. What began as a verbal argument between neighbors in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, ended in deadly violence in March of 2024 when one of the parties unwisely introduced a chainsaw into the equation. According to court documents, 30-year-old Zak Moyer became convinced that 59-year-old Edward Whitehead Jr. had harmed innocent victims. After walking away from a disagreement with the older gentleman, Moyer showed up at Whitehead's home donning a scream mask. Armed with a knife and a small chainsaw, he stabbed his neighbor in the head repeatedly, then returned home and waited for the police to arrive. Moyer was arrested on suspicion of criminal homicide. During questioning, he shared his belief that Whitehead had killed women and children the previous year, which the victim's family adamantly denies. He remains held without bail pending the outcome of his case. Unfortunately, however, the problems didn't end there. The day after the murder, Zak's father, Francis Moyer, was arrested for harassing the Whitehead family. Francis was released shortly after being booked into custody, but landed back behind bars about 6 weeks later for taunting a witness with the same type of mask that his son is accused of wearing during the murder. According to police, Francis was seen holding the mask up to a window from outside the victim's home. He remains in custody and is facing a charge for intimidating a witness. Number 9. Evan Marshall. 57-year-old retired schoolteacher Denise Fox vanished from her residence in the Long Island, New York suburb of Glen Cove on a Thursday in 2006. Her daughter dialed 911 after arriving home to find the family's sliding glass door broken and blood on the kitchen floor. A short while later, police found Fox's headless, dismembered body in the basement of a home across the street. Investigators quickly identified the perpetrator as 31-year-old Evan Marshall, a mental patient whose therapist had granted him a weekend pass to visit his family in the gated community. The next morning, Marshall returned to the home in a vehicle with Fox's severed head in the trunk. He admitted to entering the victim's home in search of drug money, while extremely high on cocaine, and attacking Fox with a knife when they crossed paths. Marshall then dragged Fox's body across the street to his parents' house, where he dismembered her remains. and stashed everything but her head in a basement trash can. In 2007, Marshall pleaded guilty to Fox's murder. He was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. In 2015, Fox's surviving family members received a $500,000 settlement in a 7-year-old wrongful death lawsuit against a therapist who granted Marshall a weekend pass shortly before the murder. While handing down the ruling, the judge admonished how the residential facility that was housing Marshall at the time of the murder for failing to take accountability for its role in the tragedy. Number 8. Dinis Moreira. Late one night in May of 2023, police responded to the Bridgewater, Massachusetts home of 69-year-old Dinis Moreira, where they found the man's neighbor, 58-year-old Valerie Oakham, bludgeoned to death with a bloody hammer laying nearby. Oakham had gone over to Moreira's house for a glass of wine earlier that evening, and at some point something had clearly gone terribly wrong. After attacking Oakham, Moreira called his adult son, who called the police. Upon arriving at the scene, officers immediately noticed that Moreira was covered in blood, automatically landing him at the top of the suspect list. Investigators initially offered few details on what they believed led up to the murder, but they revealed that they believed the killing was targeted. Moreira pleaded not guilty to murder and assault and battery with a deadly weapon. He was ordered to undergo a mental evaluation and remains in custody without bail amid the ongoing case. The details of what led up to the horrific crime have yet to be revealed. Number 7. Baltazar Castañeda. 58-year-old Richard Amezquita was relaxing on the front patio of his San Antonio home during the pre-dawn hours one morning in February of 2024 when he was approached by his neighbor, 39-year-old Baltazar Castañeda. A nearby surveillance camera was rolling as Castañeda physically assaulted and ultimately killed Amezquita. In the video, the attacker could be seen dragging the victim's body inside the house and setting it on fire. Castañeda was arrested in connection with the case and is currently facing murder and arson charges, which could put him behind bars for up to 99 years in the event of a conviction. The accused killer is also considered a habitual offender due to 2 prior felony convictions, which could enhance his sentence by decades. Bail was set at $250,000, and he no longer appears to be in custody while he awaits trial. Authorities have yet to reveal a suspected motive for the crime. Number 6. Hector Campos. 48-year-old Hector Campos and his neighbor, 53-year-old Anna Weed, got along well for years before their friendship took a nasty turn in 2016 when Campos tried canceling a family trip to Mexico and his wife decided to go without him. Weed agreed to drive Hector's wife to the airport, unaware that it would spark a grudge that would ultimately claim her life. The seemingly harmless favor sparked a bitter months-long feud between Weed and Campos, whose wife divorced him after the incident. Tensions between the neighbors eventually boiled over, and in early 2017, Campos shot Weed dead outside their homes in the Houston suburb of Spring, Texas. The deadly encounter occurred when Weed took her dog outside while Campos was washing his truck. Campos confronted Weed and accused her of knowing the location of his estranged wife, who had moved out of the home by then. Sensing the tension, Weed's dog began barking, and Campos kicked the canine, then shot Weed as she scrambled to retrieve the pet. Campos claimed that he shot Weed in self-defense after she shoved him and hit him with a roll of packaging tape. But prosecutors suspected that he killed Anna because he blamed her for his marriage falling apart. He was charged with and eventually convicted of Weed's murder and is currently serving a 45-year prison sentence. Number 5. Kenneth Hoyle. 69-year-old Kenny Hoyle and his wife initially got along with Bobby DePaul and August Dempsey, the 40-something couple who lived next door to them in Philadelphia. But a war began when Hoyle reported DePaul for putting a large shed on his property without the proper permit. The city fined DePaul and ordered him to dismantle the shed, but he fought the case. In the meantime, he threw a tantrum at Hoyle and threatened to kill him, only to act perfectly normal the next day as if nothing had happened. It eventually became evident that DePaul's drinking played a role in his increasingly explosive behavior. DePaul won his appeal to keep his shed, which sent Hoyle into an outrage. He began calling the police on the DePauls every chance he got, and the confrontations between the two men grew alarmingly heated. The rivalry took over both couples' lives while endless allegations were hurled back back and forth. Hoyle accused DePaul of throwing a cinder block through his car window, dumping a bucket full of maggots on his porch, and poisoning his dog to death. DePaul denied killing Hoyle's dog, but he made it clear that he was doing everything in his power in an attempt to get his neighbor to move. He blared loud music at all hours, flashed blindingly bright lights into the Hoyles' home, and destroyed their fence during a drunken rampage. During one particularly hostile night in 2017, Hoyle called the police, but they were unable to rush immediately to the scene. A short while later, he dialed 911 a second time and confessed to fatally shooting DePaul and Dempsey. He initially claimed that he had acted in self-defense, but surveillance video proved that the victims were unarmed when Hoyle opened fire on them. Hoyle was convicted of 2 counts of murder in 2018 and is currently serving a 66-year prison sentence, which means that he will most likely remain behind bars until his dying day. Number 4. Kevin Wagoner. After moving to Union County, Tennessee with their young grandson in 2010, Mike and Teresa Woodby quickly realized that their neighbor Kevin Wagoner operated a private firing range. The couple initially tolerated the constant sound of gunshots coming from across the street, but Mike politely asked Wagoner if he would tone down the shooting for a few weeks while he recovered after experiencing sudden heart complications. According to the Woodby's version of events, Wagoner assumed that Mike was trying to boss him around, sparking a years-long feud between the households. Wagoner would later tell a much different version of the story, claiming that the rivalry began after he refused to illegally sell Mike a gun. But Wagoner went to suspicious lengths to intimidate the Woodbys, indicating that his anger extended far beyond a simple misunderstanding over a gun sale. He began filming the family constantly, accused Mike of committing disability fraud, and even went to the media with a dramatic tale about the suffering that he claimed the Woodbys were inflicting upon him. Numerous witnesses noticed Wagoner's alarming behavior, including a school bus driver who became worried about the safety of the Woodbys' grandson. Wagoner claimed he was filming the Woodbys to gather evidence of their wrongdoings, but to onlookers, it seemed like he was trying to push Mike off the deep end so he could film his neighbor's explosive reaction for the sake of bolstering his victimhood narrative. The two families called 911 on each other at least 300 times throughout their seemingly endless feud. At one point, the Woodbys begged Wagoner to come to some sort of truce, but he refused to make peace. The long-standing dispute finally ended in 2013 when Wagoner snapped and fatally shot Mike. During the investigation into the crime, the video footage that Wagoner had intrusively recorded for so-called evidence-gathering purposes backfired on him by helping the prosecution prove its case against him. The state also showed the court a disturbing collection of video diaries Wagoner filmed of himself talking about how badly he wanted to kill Mike Woodby, to the point where it bordered on obsession. In 2016, Wagoner was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 18 years in prison. Number 3. Ellen Wink. When 61-year-old Ellen Wink's tenant of 2 years stopped paying for the room he was renting at her Norwalk, Connecticut home in 2021, she told him that she was planning to sell the house and that he would have to move. Whether or not Wink really planned to sell her home is unclear, but she was fed up with her freeloading tenant and wanted him out of there as soon as possible. But 54-year-old Kurt Lemetta had no apparent plan to go anywhere and refused to leave willingly like his landlord had hoped, leading to bitter animosity between him and Wink. In September of 2021, Wink took Lemetta's belongings to a local dump and illegally locked him out of the house. She was arrested and had no choice but to let Lemetta back in. Tensions reached a breaking point in early 2022 when Wink fatally shot Lemetta during a dispute at the residence. She told police that Lemetta had attacked her while she was cleaning, but she also mentioned how the victim had been driving her nuts, leading to suspicions that she wasn't as innocent as she claimed. Wink, a former Norwalk City official, was charged with murder. In 2023, she rejected a plea deal which would have come with a 40-year prison sentence. She continues to stand by her self-defense claim and plans to take the case to trial, despite the risk of a 60-year prison sentence if convicted as charged. A trial date has yet to be set. Number 2. Enrique Facelli. 55-year-old Julian Aubrey was a well-known gay rights activist and a respected member of his London neighborhood, which was why the community was shocked when he was found stabbed to death in his London flat in 2017. Investigators initially speculated that the murder had possibly been motivated by homophobia or somehow connected to Aubrey's past struggles with addiction. Their findings instead led them to Aubrey's neighbor of 20 years, 48-year-old Enrique Facelli, a former Uruguayan diplomat who had filed multiple complaints against Aubrey in recent years. Facelli accused Aubrey of leaving feces in the hallway of their apartment building so residents would blame Facelli's dog. He was also convinced that Aubrey was trying to poison him to death, although detectives found no evidence to back up either of these claims. Further investigation revealed that Facelli's complaints against Aubrey began shortly after he lost his job at the Uruguayan embassy 2 years prior to the murder in 2015. Facelli had worked as a diplomat for many years when his mental health suddenly declined to the point where he was no longer capable of doing his job. He spent a month in a psychiatric hospital shortly before the murder, and his condition continued to worsen following his release. Even after paying a private investigator to inspect his apartment for listening devices or evidence that Aubrey was poisoning him through the air ducts and coming up empty-handed, Facelli continued to believe that his neighbor had it out for him. He eventually became convinced that the only way he could protect himself was by killing Aubrey, bringing the bizarre situation to a tragic end. Facelli pleaded guilty to manslaughter with diminished responsibility and was remanded to a psychiatric hospital where he'll remain until or unless he is deemed to no longer be a threat to himself or others. Number 1. Pete Richter. After retiring during the 1990s, former Baltimore police officer Charles Edward Pete Richter and his wife Barbara began construction on a new home in Stevensville, Maryland. While visiting the unfurnished residence one day, the couple were approached by neighbors Mark and Diane Zander, who introduced themselves and welcomed the Richters to the neighborhood. But someone vandalized the house before the Richters even moved in, causing $20,000 worth of damage. And when Pete Richter heard that Mark Zander and another neighbor had been peering in through the windows, he became convinced that Zander was responsible for the crime. No arrests were made due to a lack of evidence, and the Zanders hoped to move past the misunderstanding and re-establish amicable ties with the Richters. Unfortunately, Pete refused to let go of his suspicions against the Zanders. He soon made enemies with several other neighbors due to his frequent complaints over slight disturbances like music, ATVs, and the sounds of children playing. The situation only worsened when the Zanders' home mysteriously burned down in 2001, leading to suspicions that Pete was responsible for the fire. By that point, several other neighbors had moved away specifically to get away from Pete, but the Zanders loved their community and refused to leave. They rebuilt the house, and the tensions between them and the Richters continued for upwards of a decade. In April of 2011, Pete lured the Zanders' dog into his yard and accused Mark of trespassing when he came to retrieve the pet. Mark tried to avoid a confrontation and was attempting to leave the property when Pete shot him twice in the back, killing him at the scene. Pete argued that he had acted in self-defense but failed to convince a jury of his innocence and was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison and is now 80 years old, which means that he may end up spending the rest of his life behind bars. In an appalling act of violence that was captured on camera in July of 2024, a Philadelphia woman shot someone's young child in the city's Holmesburg neighborhood during an argument over a trivial drug dispute. The disturbing footage showed the perpetrator opening fire on the child and his parents outside their home while yelling profanities at the victims. By the time police arrived at the scene, the victims were nowhere to be found. As it turned out, the child's parents were worried about crossing paths with the police due to some outstanding warrants for their arrest. The couple turned up at a local emergency room with the baby, who had a gunshot wound to the leg. While speaking to detectives, the victims revealed that the shooting stemmed from a $100 drug dispute between them and the accused shooter, 28-year-old Dominique Billips. According to police, the child's father was the intended target of the gunshots, while the mother and child just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thankfully, the child survived and was released from the hospital after receiving treatment for his wound. Billips was booked into custody on suspicion of aggravated assault and gun-related charges. The case is ongoing. Number 15. Jesse Montez Thornton II. 63-year-old Mark Cohen and his wife reserved VIP movie theater seats ahead of time for a Monday night date in July of 2023. But when they arrived at the cinema in Pompano Beach, Florida, a man and woman were sitting in their seats. When Cohen politely asked the pair to move, the man viciously assaulted him. Footage showed the attacker, later identified as 27-year-old Jesse Montez Thornton II, repeatedly punching Cohen in the face, causing him to fall down the aisle stairs. Bystanders pulled Thornton off of the victim and he fled the scene with his female companion, while Cohen was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. At the time, investigators were unable to identify the suspect. The Broward County Sheriff's Office released footage of the attacker to the public, along with an appeal for information that could help lead to his arrest. Thornton was finally arrested on a charge of aggravated battery with great bodily harm in September of 2023, following a 2-month-long investigation. He pleaded not guilty and bonded out of custody, but landed back behind bars in early 2024 following his arrest for a domestic violence incident. According to a police report, Thornton struck his girlfriend during an argument, as well as a neighbor who tried to break the fight up. He's accused of punching, kicking and spitting on the officers who responded to the scene as they wrestled him into custody. The arrest report also states that Thornton elbowed one officer in the face and shoved another cop's head against a paved walkway. He continued to resist even after the officers managed to handcuff him following a prolonged struggle. Thornton kicked and headbutted inside the police cruiser, smashing out a window and causing significant damage to the doors and interior. Authorities charged him with 2 counts of resisting arrest with violence, 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer, 2 counts of battery, 2 counts of resisting without violence, and 1 count of criminal mischief, resulting in damages of $1,000 or more. He pleaded not guilty to the new charges and remains held without bond amid his ongoing cases. Number 14. Andrew Cobb. 56-year-old Maria Gallegrio was riding her bicycle along a bike-only path in Key Biscayne, Florida, one morning in July of 2024 when she encountered 54-year-old Andrew Cobb, who was jogging in her lane. As she tried to pass Cobb, he struck her in the face with his water bottle, causing her to fall off her bike. The wealthy businessman initially stopped at the scene, but instead of apologizing to Gallegrio, he reportedly said, "You have to share the road. I've been hit by you guys before." He ran away before police arrived, as a crowd of witnesses came to Gallegrio's aid. The injured cyclist snapped a photo of Cobb as he left the scene and posted it on social media, in hopes that he would be identified and held accountable for his actions. Gallegrio also shared images of the bruises, cuts, road rash, and other injuries she was hospitalized with and underwent surgery for after the incident. She described Cobb's actions as deliberate and malicious, noting that he had plenty of room to avoid colliding with her, especially since he wasn't supposed to be in the bike lane to begin with. Cobb was charged with felony aggravated battery with great bodily harm. He remains free on bond while awaiting his next court date, which is scheduled for August of 2024. Number 13. Robert Norca. While responding to a residential break-in early one morning in June of 2024, police in Avon, Indiana, were met by a woman who said that her Chick-fil-A co-worker had broken into her house. 38-year-old Robert Norca's car was idling in the driveway, and he was still inside the residence when officers arrived at the scene. He exited the house covered in his own blood and told police that he had to smash a window in order to get inside so he could perform an exorcism on the woman, who he believed was possessed. Norca made a number of bizarre statements while being taken into custody, including that his co-worker hadn't been stabbed. He told officers not to look him in the eyes and asked him to go inside the house, find his CD and play track number 3 to save her. The victim and Norca had known each other for over 20 years. Prior to the break-in, Norca had sent the woman strange text messages about not listening to Spotify. Inside the home, officers found a trail of blood leading from the broken back door window to the kitchen, along with a bloody CD on the counter. The woman's entertainment and stereo system were destroyed, and it appeared as though Norca had tried to write in blood on her projector screen. Norca was taken to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being booked into the Hendricks County Jail on suspicion of felony residential entry, criminal mischief, and disorderly conduct. He was released the same day on a $500 bond and is currently awaiting his next court date. Number 12. Yoni Barrios. 2 people were killed and 6 others were wounded in October of 2022 when a knife-wielding madman went on a stabbing spree along the Las Vegas Strip. The carnage began shortly after 32-year-old Guatemalan national Yoni Barrios approached a group of showgirls and asked to take a picture with them. He pulled out a large knife as if to show it off, then without warning he fatally stabbed 30-year-old Maris Di Giovanni in the heart. Barrios then plunged the blade into 19-year-old Victoria Cayetano's shoulder. He chased after the other dancers as they ran away and stabbed 26-year-old Anna Westby. Barrios also stabbed a 47-year-old bystander named Brett Hallett, who died from his injuries. Hallett's wife Carmelita told the Las Vegas Review-Journal that she was walking with her husband when he suddenly flinched. A few moments later he said, "I don't think I'm going to make it," and collapsed. According to a surviving victim, Barrios said, "Sorry man," before plunging the knife into Hallett's back. Following his arrest, Barrios told officers that he thought the showgirls were laughing at him and making fun of his outfit. The attack was completely unprovoked, according to the women, who denied mocking Barrios. Court documents revealed a bizarre series of events leading up to the stabbing spree. A friend invited Barrios to stay with them, then rescinded the invite, and the accused killer became noticeably paranoid about people picking on him. Barrios was in the United States illegally at the time of the stabbings. A former friend of the accused killer told the New York Post that he had previously worked as an exotic dancer in Los Angeles, but that he never held a regular job and mooched off his romantic partners. Just months earlier, Barrios had flaunted a luxurious lifestyle on social media, but he became down on his luck and ended up homeless. On the day of the attacks, Barrios entered a nearby hotel and tried getting a job, but he was turned down, so he tried selling some of his belongings, telling a security guard that he was trying to come up with enough money to return to Guatemala. According to a police report, the guard reportedly told Barrios to jump in front of a train, which the hotel denied, and Barrios proceeded to attack his victims. He was charged with 2 counts of open murder and 6 counts of attempted murder, but was found mentally unfit to stand trial. The judge ordered him to undergo treatment at a state psychiatric hospital in an attempt to determine whether he can be restored to competency. Number 11. Robert Owen Greenhalgh. 36-year-old father of 2, Robert Smethurst was celebrating his birthday at a bar in the English town of Bolton in September of 2021 when he accidentally stepped on 31-year-old bodybuilder Robert Owen Greenhalgh's foot. He apologized and everything seemed fine until nearly 2 hours later when Greenhalgh attacked Smethurst and his cousin, Aaron Bates, in an intoxicated and drug-fueled rampage. Bates suffered a concussion, but Smethurst was struck with so much force that he suffered immediate brain trauma. Smethurst died from his injuries and Greenhalgh fled the scene in his work van. The accused killer was arrested later that day on suspicion of murder. During a search of Greenhalgh's phone, detectives discovered text messages bragging about spending more than $64,000 on cocaine over a 6-month period. He also boasted about using steroids and hurting people while working as a debt collector, pointing toward a troubling propensity for violence. The phone also contained messages from Greenhalgh's mom admonishing her son for his abhorrent lifestyle, which in her words included lying, stealing, and controlling with brute force. She issued a series of warnings including, "You are kidding yourself if you think this is going to end well," and "Only idiots do what you are doing, not nice people." But Greenhalgh ignored his mother's tough love and continued spiraling out of control. On the night of the deadly attack, he was reportedly high on cocaine and consumed 15 shots of liquor. After fleeing the scene, he drove to a friend's house and busted the front door in for a laugh when it wouldn't open. Greenhalgh admitted to a reduced manslaughter charge in 2022 and was sentenced to 15 years, including 11 years and 3 months in prison, followed by 3 years and 9 months on supervised release. Number 10. Davante Palmer. A shopping trip to a Walmart store in Shreveport, Louisiana, took a terrifying turn for Lonnie Blancett in June of 2024 when a complete stranger attacked him out of nowhere. Blancett grabbed his gun in preparation to defend himself, but his attacker 31-year-old Davante Palmer tried grabbing it out of his hand. As the men wrestled over the weapon, it accidentally discharged. Thankfully, no one was struck by the bullet, but Palmer refused to get off of Blancett, who later accused onlookers of standing around and filming the attack while he screamed for help. At some point during the struggle, Blancett realized that the gun was jammed. He released the magazine and grabbed a knife out of his pocket and slashed Palmer across the arm. Palmer attempted to flee, but he and Blancett were detained for questioning. After speaking with both men and several witnesses, police determined that Blancett was innocent of any wrongdoing and arrested Palmer on a simple assault charge. They were unable to identify a motive for the attack, leading them to conclude that Blancett was targeted at random. The case is ongoing. Number 9. Savell Hightower. 27-year-old Andrew Redioff was walking to his job at an elementary school in Greenville, North Carolina, one morning in February of 2024, when a stranger on a bicycle opened fire on him without warning. He narrowly survived after being shot 5 times. Later identified as 38-year-old Savell Hightower, a convicted felon from Ohio, the accused shooter tried to flee the scene but was stopped by a police officer. He was apprehended after a brief shootout with the cop and is now facing a laundry list of criminal charges, including multiple counts of attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to kill resulted in serious injury, assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill on a law enforcement officer, being a felon in possession of a firearm and possession of a stolen firearm. When asked why he committed the crime, Hightower reportedly said that he had been poisoned and needed to make a sacrifice in order to survive. He showed signs of extreme paranoia, including a belief that he was being followed by the government and that federal agents had bugged his apartment. Hightower also said that he had called 911 multiple times the previous night and during the week leading up to his arrest. Records show that he remains held at the Pitt County Jail with bond set at over $7 million. Number 8. Deashe Calhoun. 82-year-old Hubert Mullins was working as a doorman on Manhattan's Upper West Side in September of 2022 when a complete stranger slashed him with a machete and doused him with bear spray. He was hospitalized with a skull fracture, and the suspect, 20-year-old Deashe Calhoun, was charged with attempted murder, assault and possession of a weapon. Calhoun, who was described as a woman in initial news reports but goes by he/him pronouns, had at least 7 prior arrests under his belt at the time of the slashing, on at least 2 occasions over a 5-week period leading up to the incident. He was arrested twice for threatening strangers with a machete. He was charged with misdemeanors in both cases and released without bail. Several of the other crimes Calhoun was accused of involved deadly weapons, yet none of these incidents landed him behind bars. Many people blamed Calhoun's repeated releases without bail on New York State's bail reform policies, which prohibit judges from imposing bail against defendants for the vast majority of crimes. Bail was set at $500,000 following the attack on Mullins, and Calhoun remained at Rikers Island until he pleaded guilty to assault in August of 2023. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation, and will become eligible for parole in December of 2026. Number 7. Raymond Link. In May of 2024, a 59-year-old woman was attacked in broad daylight while walking her dog in McHenry Park in Illinois. The assailant, who was later identified by police as 47-year-old Raymond Link, was accused of placing his full body weight on the victim, trying to strangle her and stomping on her head and neck. A bystander attempted to intervene and was punched over a dozen times, leaving him with a broken clavicle. By the time police arrived at the scene, the woman was unconscious. She was hospitalized with serious injuries including dog bites, lacerations, a ruptured eye, and an open facial fracture. Link was detained without bail on charges of attempted murder, aggravated battery by strangulation, and 2 counts each of aggravated battery causing great bodily harm and aggravated battery in a public place. He had no known connections to the victim, and authorities have yet to reveal a suspected motive for the attack. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 6. Italian couple targeted in hate crime. In July of 2024, a pair of male lovers were attacked in Rome while walking hand in hand before dawn. They were on their way home after a Pride event when a car cut them off as they crossed the street, causing one of the men to scream out of fear. 3 men and a woman exited the vehicle and hurled derogatory and homophobic insults at the victims. They proceeded to beat the couple, who initially tried to defend themselves but were outnumbered. In the meantime, onlookers passed by without stopping to help or stood by and recorded the incident with their phone instead of intervening. One of the men was kicked, punched and hit with a belt, and both victims were struck in the head. 3 Good Samaritans eventually stepped in to help, and the injured couple went to the emergency room. In an anonymous statement, the pair condemned hate-driven violence and called on others to do the same, noting that it has no place in modern society. They also described feeling mocked and deeply hurt by witnesses who took the time to film them but didn't try to help. Number 5. Ambushed by strangers. 32-year-old Spencer Goggin was waiting for a taxi after a night out, celebrating a friend's birthday in Perth, Australia in June of 2022, when a group of strangers attacked him from behind without warning. He didn't get a chance to see the assailants as they beat him and stomped on his head, but he could hear bystanders yelling at the attackers to stop. Goggin suffered a concussion, multiple cuts, 2 black eyes and other injuries. After the attack, he told 9 News that he felt lucky to be alive, but on the same note, he pointed out that nobody should ever have to feel lucky that they survived a night out. He credited his survival with his split-second decision to put his hand beneath his face when he was knocked to the ground, which provided some cushioning between his head and the pavement. Instead of taking a taxi home, Goggin took a cab to the hospital, where he received treatment for his injuries. He went public with his story, in hopes that someone would be able to identify his attackers and to speak out against senseless acts of violence. Unfortunately, it appears as though the suspects were never caught. Number 4. Shondel Larkin. In late March of 2024, an innocent man was stabbed to death on a MAX train in Portland, Oregon, during his evening commute home from work. Police found him dead on a train station platform with multiple stab wounds, and it was apparent, based on surveillance footage and other evidence, that the attack was random. A short while later, officers found a man on the train with blood on his clothing. Identified by law enforcement as 51-year-old Shondel Larkin, he was wanted out of California for lurking outside women's homes while on a GPS ankle monitor. Larkin had also previously served a 17-year prison sentence for assaulting a woman in her home. When questioned about his motive for the stabbing, Larkin reportedly told police that voices in his head had told him to do it. He is currently being held without bail at the Multnomah County Jail on charges of second-degree murder and unlawful use of a weapon. Number 3. Jermaine Bennett and Savon Morrison. 49-year-old Jeffrey Chapman was approached by 2 men and bludgeoned to death with a tire iron during a midnight bike ride in Clearwater, Florida in October of 2022. He had no known connection to the attackers, and a 79-year-old man had nearly been killed in a similar attack about an hour earlier, leading police to believe that he was targeted randomly. The first victim, John Budanas, told police that a car had pulled up beside him. 2 people exited the vehicle, and one of them asked Budanas if he knew the area. The next thing the senior citizen knew, he was being beaten with a tire iron. He managed to call 911 afterward and survived his injuries. Relying on surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts, investigators tracked one of the suspects to an optician's office where he was an employee. 26-year-old Jermaine Bennett admitted to the crimes during questioning without showing any remorse and was charged with first-degree murder. A second suspect, 18-year-old Savon Morrison, was arrested the following week on a principal to first-degree murder charge. Bennett was slated to go to trial in February of 2025, but he decided to plead guilty as charged in May of 2024 and was automatically sentenced to life without parole. Morrison remains held without bail and is scheduled to go to trial in January of 2025. Number 2. Alexander Russell. 70-year-old Mary Jane Dustin was enjoying a neighborhood walk in Windsor Locks, Connecticut in October of 2022 when someone snuck up behind her and struck her in the back of the head in broad daylight, knocking her to the ground. She was hospitalized with a major head laceration, a broken finger, and head injuries which affected her memory and her ability to communicate. The neurologist who treated her predicted that she would eventually make a full recovery, but only time would tell. In the meantime, police charged the alleged attacker, 40-year-old Alexander Lesieur Russell, with first-degree assault and first-degree reckless endangerment. Records show that he remains held on $25,000 bail amid the ongoing case. Just a year before the attack on Dustin, Russell had been arrested for shoving a 62-year-old librarian. Records show that he also has an arrest record out of Brevard County, Florida, dating back to 2016 for criminal mischief and resisting arrest without violence. In one prior case, he was accused of throwing a large metal object at a woman's car for no reason, causing several $100s worth of damages. Number 1. Out-of-control teens abuse fast food workers. In November of 2016, a 29-year-old restaurant employee in Manchester, England, asked some rowdy and disruptive teenagers to leave. Instead of politely complying, a member of the group threw a bottle of soda at the worker's head. One of the badly behaved diners returned a short while later and stabbed the employee in the arm with a pair of scissors. He went to the hospital for treatment of his wound. Greater Manchester Police released surveillance footage of 2 persons of interest, but it's unclear whether the perpetrators were ever caught. 20-year-old Emma Rourke was reported missing on January the 27th of 2022, having last been seen by her family at about 11:30 that morning when she left to take a walk along the American River Parkway. The young woman, a resident of Rancho Cordova, California, described as being on the autism spectrum, remained missing until February the 1st when police found her partially nude body in a secluded area at the American River access point in Sacramento. According to the resulting police report, Rourke had been kidnapped, assaulted and fatally strangled. Her remains were bound with rope and hung from a tree under a series of tarps near the riverbank in what the authorities described as a homeless encampment. DNA recovered from the crime scene was linked to 37-year-old Michaelo Morgan Rawls, a transient from the Sacramento area with a criminal record dating back to 2005 for burglary, resisting arrest and being a felon in possession of ammunition. 2 days after abducting and brutally murdering Rourke, Rawls reportedly sold her cell phone to another homeless man, later identified as Cedric Sandiford, and told him not to reveal where he'd gotten it. In defiance of Rawls' instructions, Sandiford used the device to contact Rourke's father, who in turn contacted the authorities. Sandiford ultimately led investigators to the encampment where he'd purchased the phone, the same encampment where the victim's body was located. Rawls was held in custody without bond on charges that included murder with special circumstances. During a preliminary court hearing held a few days after his arrest, he showed little emotion and spoke only to correct the Sacramento County Court Commissioner on the correct pronunciation of his name. After attending a party at their aunt's house in Concord, California one evening in July of 2018, 18-year-old Nia Wilson and her sister, Latifah and Tashia Wilson, headed home on a Bay Area Rapid Transit BART train. They disembarked at MacArthur Station in Oakland with plans to transfer, but as they stepped off the train, a stranger randomly slashed Nia and Latifah's necks. Before fleeing the scene on foot, the attacker stepped back and watched for several moments as Nia bled out in her sister's arms. Nia died on the subway platform and Latifah survived after being rushed to the hospital with severe injuries. Police identified the slasher as 27-year-old John Lee Cowell, a homeless drifter who had previously served federal time for armed robbery. He had a history of aggressive and threatening behavior and had been the subject of at least 2 restraining orders, including one that was taken out by his former employer for threatening to kill an employee and another that was taken out by his family due to concerns about his drug use. Cowell was apprehended the day after the slashing thanks to a keen-eyed witness who recognized him in a BART station and called the police. He was charged with first-degree murder, assault with a deadly weapon and violation of parole, along with a special circumstance of lying in wait, which meant that he would face life without parole or the death penalty if convicted as charged. Given the unprovoked nature of the attack and a distinct lack of a discernible motive, many people speculated that Nia's murder was racially motivated. Cowell's family denied this, claiming in a statement that he had a history of suffering from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and that his mental illness may have played a role in his actions. His mental health was also brought up in court, but he was ultimately deemed competent to stand trial after being examined by 3 experts. Cowell's defense team argued that he was not guilty due to insanity, which wasn't difficult to believe based on his repeated courtroom outbursts, but the jury concluded that he had acted with intent and an awareness of right and wrong, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder, landing him behind bars for life without the possibility of parole. Number 15. The murder of Alexa Stakely. 29-year-old single mom Alexa Stakely experienced a parent's worst nightmare in July of 2024 when a trio of teens carjacked her in Columbus, Ohio, with her young son in the back seat. Stakely was picking her son up from a babysitter's house at 1:30 in the morning and had just placed the little boy in his car seat when she realized that she had forgotten something inside. She ran back in to retrieve the item and came out just moments later to find one of the suspects behind the wheel of her SUV. The accused vehicle thief stepped on the gas and struck Stakely as she tried to stop the carjacking, causing her to fall and hit her head on the pavement. She was rushed to a nearby hospital where she died from her injuries, and the thieves abandoned the SUV nearby. The accused killer, Rayon Hawkins, turned himself into the police and was charged with murder. During questioning, he admitted that he had panicked and stepped on the accelerator when Stakely exited the babysitter's house. His two accomplices, including 19-year-old Gerald Dowling and another unnamed teen, are also facing murder charges. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 14. Kimani Johan Marshall. In July of 2024, a North Carolina family's $5,500 champion French bulldog was snatched out of their front yard in Harnett County in broad daylight. By the time the owners realized that their front door had mistakenly been left open, the dog, Tori, was long gone. They searched high and low for the missing pup, only to eventually discover that she had died from heat stroke after being placed in the back of a stifling FedEx truck. The accused dog thief, 44-year-old Kimani Johan Marshall, was working as a delivery driver for the company when he befriended Tori's owners. He had expressed an interest in breeding Tori with his French bulldog in the past, but the family had declined the offer. Prosecutors are now accusing him of stealing Tori while delivering packages in the neighborhood. Marshall turned himself into the police after finding out that a warrant had been issued for his arrest and was promptly fired from his job. He was charged with larceny of a dog, possession of stolen goods, and cruelty to animals. Number 13. Elizabeth Mascarelli. In July of 2024, authorities attempted to raid the Toms River, New Jersey home of 29-year-old Elizabeth Mascarelli, who was suspected of harboring an accused murderer and high-ranking Bloods member named Maxwell Johnston. The suspects barricaded themselves inside the residence, leading to a tense 7-hour standoff. 35-year-old Johnston was wanted for the recent fatal shooting of his ex-girlfriend, 25-year-old Gabriella Carolillo. He died during the standoff, and Mascarelli was detained without bail for harboring a fugitive. While searching Mascarelli's phone, investigators were shocked to find photos of her and Johnston posing with a clearly deceased male victim who was amputated at the top of his legs and had a hatchet lodged in his chest. The victim was identified as Mascarello's landlord, 56-year-old Kerry Rollerson. Some of the gruesome photos were taken in the basement of Mascarelli's home. Others appeared to show Johnston, Mascarelli, and a third suspect, 42-year-old Danielle Bolstad, standing around a burn barrel on a remote property where Rollerson's mutilated remains were eventually found. He had been shot 3 times and bludgeoned in the head, then cut into 8 pieces and discarded in the burn barrel. Investigators believe that Johnston killed Rollerson, but they have yet to reveal a suspected motive for the crime. Mascarelli, Bolstad, and 2 other suspects, 43-year-old Jared Krysiak and 36-year-old Jared Palumbo, are facing charges for helping Johnston dismember and dispose of the victim's remains. All 4 defendants are being held without bail as they await their next court date. Number 12. LaRenee Austin. In June of 2010, a frantic woman named LaRenee Austin entered a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Station and said that she had just found her best friend, 29-year-old Linnell Barsock, murdered in the victim's Palmdale, California home. Austin said that she realized something was amiss when she entered Barsock's garage and slipped on fresh blood. After seeing Barsock's body, she panicked and fled. Responding officers found Barsock lying face down with a gunshot wound to the back of the head. There were no signs of forced entry and her face was covered, indicating that her killer knew her and had access to her home, and that they didn't want to look at her after they murdered her. Austin pointed toward Barsock's live-in boyfriend, Louis Bonheur, as the possible killer. The couple had recently been having problems due to Barsok's romantic relationship with another man, and investigators found a handwritten note at the crime scene that appeared to be penned by Barsok, stating that she was in love with another man. To detectives, these details added up to the perfect motive for murder at the hands of a jealous lover. Bonheur denied any involvement in Barsok's death but was detained until surveillance footage proved that he was nowhere near the crime scene at the time of the homicide. Further investigation revealed that Austin had lied in some of her statements to the police about the events of that day. Additionally, her fingerprints were found on a pair of gloves at the crime scene, and she had exaggerated about the closeness of her friendship with Barsok. It was also discovered that Austin and Barsok had had a secret fling, which Barsok had recently ended in order to focus on her relationship with Bonheur. Barsok told Austin that she wanted to continue being platonic friends, and Austin had seemed perfectly okay with the idea, leaving the victim unaware that a monster was lurking in plain sight. By the time a warrant was issued for Austin's arrest, she had fled the United States. She was apprehended in Brazil in January of 2012 after being featured on America's Most Wanted, and was found guilty of first-degree murder in August of 2015, landing her 2 prison terms of 25 years to life. Number 11. Thomas Kinworthy Jr. In late August of 2020, 29-year-old St. Louis police officer Tamaris Bohannon responded to the residence of an elderly couple who had been forced out of their home by an armed intruder. 42-year-old Thomas Kinworthy Jr. had barricaded himself inside the house, leading to a 12-hour standoff with law enforcement. During the standoff, Kinworthy shot Officer Bohannon in the head and another officer in the leg. Bohannon died from his injuries, and Kinworthy was charged with first-degree murder, assault, burglary, resisting arrest, unlawful possession of a firearm, and 3 counts of armed criminal action. Kinworthy's defense attorney argued that his client was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the crime, and argued for a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict. One expert testified in favor of the insanity claim, while another accused Kinworthy of faking or grossly exaggerating his symptoms, telling the court that the defendant acted theatrical, dramatic, and like he was putting on a performance during his evaluation. Not to mention, this was far from Kinworthy's first brush with the law. In fact, the accused killer had a lengthy criminal history, including prior convictions for a violent kidnapping, stabbing a fellow inmate while incarcerated, and domestic violence against his ex-wife. In June of 2024, a jury found Kinworthy guilty of first-degree murder and several other charges. He received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Number 10. Candy and Corey Zito. A group of ATV riders happened upon a horrifying discovery in rural Leeds, Alabama, on a summer afternoon in 2015 when they spotted a burned human body in a bonfire pit. The remains were damaged beyond recognition, but police managed to obtain 1 intact fingerprint. They identified the slain individual as 22-year-old Anthony Shane Gibson, who had last been seen 3 days earlier. Gibson's family had reported him missing after he borrowed his grandmother's car and failed to return home. Following the discovery of his body, the medical examiner determined that he had been fatally shot and his death was ruled a homicide. Phone records revealed that he had been in contact with his former girlfriend, 30-year-old Candy Zito, on the day of his murder, giving detectives their first promising lead. Candy Renee Zito grew up in an affluent household in Chelsea, Alabama, as the black sheep in a family of overachievers. She preferred partying over working or school and was living in a tent in her parents' yard after being kicked out of their house due to her untrustworthy behavior. Candy was uncooperative when detectives called her on the phone and tried talking to her about Gibson's murder. 6 days later, she led officers in Daviess County, Indiana, on a high-speed chase with Gibson's grandmother's stolen car. The pursuit ended when Candy crashed the vehicle, leaving both her and her cousin, 26-year-old Corey Zito, seriously injured. As Corey languished in a months-long coma, Candy recovered and was brought into the police station for questioning. She initially claimed that she hadn't spoken to Gibson in years, but a search of her phone proved that she had lured him to her residence by asking him to bring her pizza. The device also contained photos indicating that Candy and Corey were possibly involved in an incestuous relationship with one another. After realizing she was busted, Candy claimed that Gibson had gotten aggressive toward her and that Corey shot him while she hid in her tent. A jailhouse informant later told investigators that Candy had admitted to shooting Gibson during a robbery gone wrong and helping Corey dispose of his body. When Corey finally emerged from his coma in September of 2015, he was too brain damaged to remember anything pertinent to the case. Prosecutors charged him and Candy with murder, and they both pleaded guilty in exchange for a 20-year prison sentence. Number 9. Collins Jumaisi Kalosha. In 2024, 10 sacks containing the dismembered remains of at least 9 murdered women were found in an abandoned trash-filled quarry in Nairobi, Kenya's Mukuru slums. The gruesome discovery was made after a woman paid some men to search the quarry for her missing sister, who had vanished the previous month. Shortly after news of the disturbing find began to circulate, police announced the arrest of the suspected killer, 33-year-old Collins Jumaisi Kalosha. According to law enforcement, Kalosha confessed to killing at least 42 women since 2022, including the victims found in the quarry. Authorities claimed that they connected him to the crimes based on cell phone records, but declined to offer many other details, including an alleged motive for the murders. Kalosha's lawyer is now claiming that his client's confession was coerced and that Kalosha is being targeted as part of an elaborate plot to conceal murders that were committed by the police themselves. The quarry where the bodies were found is located across the street from a police station, and victims' relatives claimed that the authorities were slow to address their missing persons reports, adding to a growing list of reasons why many people are doubting Kalosha's guilt. Coupled with Kenyan law enforcement's long-standing reputation for extrajudicial killings and the fact that the murders came amid an epidemic of gender-based violence in the country, it's not entirely unbelievable that police corruption could be involved. Kalosha's neighbors noticed that he frequently had female visitors at his home, but they never heard anyone screaming for help or noticed any other signs of distress coming from the residents. They're finding it hard to believe that Kalosha could have killed more than 36 victims right under their noses, especially in a place where everyone knows everyone else's business. But the authorities are standing by their version of events, and Kalosha remains in custody as the investigation continues. Number 8. Joseph Brandon Girdville. While responding to a domestic incident at a trailer park in San Juan Capistrano, California one morning in July of 2024, Orange County deputies found the decapitated bodies of 79-year-old Antoinette Girdville, her husband, 77-year-old Ronald Girdville, and the couple's dog. Shortly after arriving at the scene, police were alerted about a blood-covered man who had assaulted a maintenance worker in the same mobile home park, later identified as Antoinette and Ronald's 41-year-old son, Joseph Brandon Girdville. He had stolen the maintenance worker's golf cart and was attempting to flee the neighborhood. Deputies caught up to Girdville about 1.5 miles outside the community and shot him during a confrontation. He was taken to the hospital for treatment to his injuries and was subsequently booked into the Orange County Jail on 2 counts of homicide. Girdville is being held without bail pending the outcome of his case, and his motive for committing the double homicide remains a mystery for the time being. Number 7. Lyndon McLeod. In December of 2021, 47-year-old Lyndon McLeod murdered 5 people during a shooting spree in Denver, Colorado. The campaign of violence began at the Soul Tribe tattoo shop, where he fatally shot 44-year-old Alicia Cardenas and 35-year-old Elisa Gunn. A third victim, Jimmy Maldonado, survived gunshots to the neck and back. Just minutes later, McLeod burglarized a home near the shop. He then proceeded to another residence where he killed 67-year-old Michael Swinyard. After a brief exchange of gunfire with police, McLeod drove to nearby Lakewood and entered another tattoo shop, Lucky 13 Tattoo. He emptied the clip of his gun in less than 10 seconds, killing Danny Schofield, then went to the nearby Hyatt House Hotel where he fatally shot an employee named Sarah Steck. The disturbing crime spree finally ended when McLeod was killed during a shootout with police officer Ashley Ferris, who survived a gunshot wound to the abdomen. McLeod was no stranger to law enforcement at the time of the murders. In fact, he had fallen under investigation twice for his disturbing behavior, but neither of the probes had resulted in any criminal charges being brought against him. And while the authorities have refused to go into detail about the nature of the investigations, records show that numerous people contacted law enforcement with their suspicions that McLeod was dangerous in the year leading up to the shooting spree. A trilogy of books that McLeod wrote offers some disturbing insight into the inner workings of his mind. Written under the pseudonym Roman McClay, the stories are about a man named Lyndon McLeod who murders 46 people due to petty grudges and perceived betrayals. The books contain threats against several of his actual victims, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement, right-wing media personality Ben Shapiro, and others. McLeod's writings also promote far-right political views and bear misogynistic overtones, providing a glimpse into the bitter and self-pitying lens that he viewed the world through as his anger reached its tipping point. Number 6. Anthony Montwheeler. In December of 2016, 50-year-old Anthony Montwheeler admitted that he had faked mental illness to avoid going to prison after kidnapping his first ex-wife in 1996. As a result, he had been found not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered to the custody of a state hospital. He remained under supervision for 20 years until he persuaded a review board to release him back into the free world without restrictions. A forensic psychiatrist concluded that Montwheeler was still a danger to the community, but their opinion was overridden by another expert who disagreed with the findings. Less than a month after being freed back into the community, Montwheeler kidnapped his second ex-wife, Anita Harmon, at knife point. He stabbed her to death in his car, then led police on a high-speed chase, which ended when he collided head-on with another vehicle. The other driver, David Bates, was killed in the crash, and Montwheeler was charged with 2 counts of murder. Despite his admission to faking mental illness in the past, Montwheeler's mental health once again came into question during his court proceedings. One expert testified that while the defendant was exaggerating his symptoms, he was legitimately suffering from a serious adjustment disorder. Montwheeler was found incompetent to stand trial in order to undergo inpatient treatment with the goal of restoring him to competency so his case could proceed. Montwheeler was declared fit to stand trial a few months later, but the case dragged on for 2 more years before he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, and third-degree assault. He was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years and will be 78 years old when he gains his first chance at freedom. Number 5. Scott Lee Kimball. 19-year-old Casey McLeod was reported missing in August of 2003 after failing to show up for her scheduled shift at a Subway restaurant in Thornton, Colorado. Because she had a history of running away from home and was now legally an adult, police assumed she had disappeared on her own accord and did not undertake any major efforts to find her. At the time, Casey's mother, Lori McLeod, was dating a man named Scott Lee Kimball, who claimed to be an FBI agent. Kimball reassured Lori that Casey had probably run off but promised to use his connections to try finding her. The couple married later that year, and Lori remained dedicated to searching for her daughter, even as Kimball seemed to lose interest in locating Casey. By late 2005, it had become clear to Lori that her marriage to Kimball wasn't going to work. The couple separated, and Kimball soon fell under suspicion of financial fraud. Lori was questioned by investigators who told her that her husband was not an FBI agent, like he had claimed, but a career conman with dozens of prior convictions for fraud, theft, and other crimes. And while Kimball had provided information to the FBI as a paid informant in the past, he had never worked for the agency. By then, Lori had already started to wonder if Kimball was responsible for Casey's disappearance. She became even more suspicious after learning that her estranged husband had lied about being a federal agent. Further investigation revealed that Kimball had suspicious links to the disappearances of 24-year-old Leanne Emery, who had vanished in January of 2003, and 25-year-old Jennifer Markham, who went missing just weeks later. Kimball also became a suspect in the murder of his brother, Terry Kimball, who disappeared while staying with Scott and Lori in 2004. Casey McLeod's skull was found in a remote wooded area in 2007. Terry Kimball's mummified body was found in 2009, and Scott Kimball eventually led police to Leanne Emery's remains. In order to avoid the death penalty, he pleaded guilty to the second-degree murders of Jennifer Markham, Leanne Emery, Casey McLeod, and Terry Kimball. He's currently serving a 70-year prison sentence. The true extent of Kimball's crimes may never be known. Authorities suspect that he may be responsible for additional murders that they haven't connected him to, but he seems to have no interest in admitting to any more crimes. The good news is that he's highly unlikely to outlive his current scheduled release date of January 2082. Number 4. The murder of Officer Ariana Preston. 24-year-old Chicago police officer Ariana Preston was arriving home after working a late-night shift in May of 2023, when a group of young men tried to rob her just steps from her door, one of the suspects shot her twice during an exchange of gunfire, before fleeing the scene in a stolen vehicle with his co-conspirators, one of whom stopped to steal Preston's gun as she lay dying on the sidewalk. A half hour passed before a responding officer found Preston, who was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. Surveillance footage revealed that the suspects had set the getaway vehicle on fire before heading to a nearby home, leading to the arrests of 18-year-old Joseph Brooks, 18-year-old Jaquan Buchanan, 19-year-old Travell Breland, and Jalen Fraser on suspicion of first-degree murder, armed robbery, burglary, and possession of a stolen vehicle. According to prosecutors, the defendants killed Preston at the tail end of a robbery spree after targeting at least 3 other victims. The accused gunman, Joseph Brooks, reportedly admitted to shooting the young police officer when he saw her reaching for her gun. Another suspect, Jalen Fraser, bragged about the murder during a phone call with a friend, saying it was his work. He later admitted that he had stayed in the car while his accomplices carried out the deadly attempted robbery. All 4 suspects remain held without bail as they await the outcomes of their cases. Number 3. Mark Latunsky. 25-year-old hairstylist Kevin Bacon and 50-year-old former chemist Mark Latunsky connected on Grindr a few days before Christmas in 2019. Bacon went to Latunsky's home in Morris, Michigan for what he thought was going to be a casual, intimate encounter, but he never came home, and his loved one started looking for him when he failed to show up at a family gathering on Christmas. Bacon's family became even more worried when they found his car outside a shopping plaza with his phone, wallet, and other personal belongings inside. They reported him missing and stepped up their search effort while police got to work trying to locate the missing man. Investigators quickly discovered that Bacon had been corresponding with Latunsky, who had previously been accused of holding 2 men captive on separate occasions in a purpose-built basement dungeon at his home. Police paid a visit to the residence where they found Bacon's naked body hanging upside down in the secret dungeon room. He had been stabbed, slashed, mutilated, and partially cannibalized by Latunsky, who admitted to the gruesome act and was charged with murder. At a previous point during his adulthood, Latunsky was a typical married middle-class family man and father of 4, but his behavior grew increasingly disturbing and paranoid over the years, and his wife divorced him in 2012 after he sought mental help at her urging but refused to take medication and could no longer hold a job. Years earlier, Latunsky had been found incompetent to stand trial in an unrelated case after he was charged with felony kidnapping for refusing to return his kids to his ex-wife. His mental health also fell at the center of the court proceedings surrounding Bacon's murder, but he was ultimately deemed competent to stand trial. In September of 2022, Latunsky decided to avoid a trial altogether and pleaded guilty to first-degree premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. Number 2. Clay Waller. When 39-year-old Jackie Waller vanished in Jackson, Missouri in June of 2011, investigators were quick to narrow their sights on her estranged husband, Clay Waller, a former sheriff's deputy with a lengthy history of abusive behavior. During a previous domestic dispute, Clay had told Jackie that if she ever divorced him, she would be signing her own death warrant. Jackie feared that he was serious, but eventually gathered the courage to leave and file for divorce. She disappeared shortly after meeting with Clay and their divorce attorneys, and months passed with no sign of her fate or whereabouts. In April of 2012, roughly 10 months after Jackie went missing, prosecutors decided to move forward with a murder case against Clay, who was already serving a 5-year federal prison sentence for threatening to kill his in-laws. Knowing that the authorities and Jackie's family were desperate to find her body, Clay offered to reveal the location of her remains in exchange for his first-degree murder charge being reduced to second-degree murder, which would come with considerably less prison time. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, prosecutors accepted the offer at the urging of Jackie's family. Waller led police to an island in the Mississippi River, where they located Jackie's grave after 5 days of digging. She had been beaten and strangled to death, and the light sentence that came along with Clay's agreement to lead authorities to her remains bothered prosecutors to no end, prompting them to take a close second look at all the evidence. While re-examining the case, they realized that Clay had spent the night before the murder at his girlfriend's home in Illinois. It meant that he crossed state lines in order to kill Jackie, enabling federal authorities to charge him with interstate domestic violence. The prosecution prepared a strong case, prompting Clay to avoid a trial by pleading guilty to the charge in 2017. An additional 35 years was tacked onto his sentence, ensuring that he'll spend at least 50 years behind bars before he has a chance at seeing freedom again. Number 1. Ian Bornach. 39-year-old registered nurse and mother of 2, Katie Bornach, separated from her bodybuilder husband, 43-year-old Ian Bornach, in 2021 after enduring a tumultuous 8-year marriage marked by physical and mental abuse. Determined to move on from the toxic relationship, she moved out of her and Ian's shared home in Fort Denard, Florida, and obtained a restraining order against Ian. Just days after Hurricane Ian pummeled the Florida coast in September of 2022, Katie vanished after going to collect some of her belongings from her estranged husband's home. The next day, police found her jawbone in a burn pile on Ian's property, along with a 50-gallon barrel containing more of her dismembered body parts. Ian was charged in state court with first-degree murder and possession of a controlled substance for having steroids without a prescription. He was also hit with a federal charge for 13 unregistered silencers that were found in his home. According to court documents, Ian admitted that he was angry with Katie for filing a domestic violence complaint against him, but his explosive temper was nothing new. According to Katie's family members, who have accused the justice system of failing to properly hold Ian accountable for previous domestic violence charges he had faced prior to Katie's death. Katie's loved ones told various news outlets that she had repeatedly sought help from law enforcement with Ian's threatening behavior, but the police took limited action and the harassment continued, even after Katie obtained an order of protection. There were several missed opportunities for authorities to pursue charges against Ian, according to Katie's family, including when prosecutors declined to pursue a case after he kicked in his estranged wife's door and threatened to kill her. Ian is now behind bars without bail as he awaits trial for Katie's murder. Prosecutors plan to seek the death penalty, but no trial date has been set. On July the 6th of 2021, near the end of the 3-hour American Airlines Flight 1774 from Dallas to Charlotte, a woman suffered a mental breakdown that led to her being gagged and duct taped to her seat. The unnamed passenger started screaming, "I need to get off this plane," and "You need to let me off this plane." She then attempted to open the forward boarding door mid-flight before assaulting and biting a flight attendant who'd tried to help her. The woman also reportedly tried to hug and kiss another passenger and bit a different flyer multiple times before she was restrained. After the plane landed, the unruly flyer was shown in a TikTok video, still taped to her seat, while trying to scream at other passengers as they disembarked. She was taken off the aircraft via stretcher and then transported to a hospital where she underwent a mental health evaluation prior to being placed on an American Airlines no-fly list. Updates from April of 2022 indicated that she faced a fine of $81,950, which was at the time the largest sanction ever handed out by the Federal Aviation Administration. Number 10. Tiffany Michelle Miles. While on American Airlines Flight 3444 from Jacksonville, Florida to Washington, D.C., 36-year-old Tiffany Michelle Miles caused chaos because her alcoholic beverage wasn't served quickly enough. The incident occurred in late February of 2023, and fellow passenger Cara Rosario told ABC 11 that Miles had become belligerent and yelling that she paid for first class and that she's not getting her drink that she's ordered. Miles then got up and tried to force her way into the cockpit. Air traffic control audio from the pilot indicated that the subject is currently on the loose in the cabin and that she was somewhat restrained by passengers and the flight crew. Miles recorded herself while she was actively being bound and said, "I need you all to see this is what they're doing to me," before complaining that no one had shown her a badge. The pilot diverted the aircraft to North Carolina for an emergency landing and asked that Miles be removed as soon as they touched the tarmac. The air traffic control operator responded that a long gun crew is going to be on the outside end of the aircraft. A photo taken aboard would show Miles being led out in handcuffs by several police officers. No passengers were injured during the commotion, and all of them were subsequently booked on other flights to DC. Miles, who in the aftermath claimed that she'd been trying to enter the restroom and not storm the cockpit, initially faced a charge of airport obstruction, punishable by up to 20 years in prison. The charge was, however, ultimately dismissed by the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority Police Department. Number 9. Red Wings Incident. An unnamed passenger on a flight operated by the Red Wings airline from Moscow to Antalya, Turkey, was shown on a viral video from the summer of 2017 having a drunken meltdown while covered in blood. The man, apparently in a state of disorientation, yelled and struck the seat in front of him as blood soaked his clothes from a cut to his face, the cause of which remained unknown. A woman sitting next to him was seemingly calm throughout the clip and continued looking out the aircraft's window. The passenger's outburst was believed to have lasted for about an hour, and when the cabin crew failed to calm him down, they decided to restrain him. Other passengers helped and tied the intoxicated man's hands with a seatbelt. The police then took him into custody when the flight reached its destination. Number 8. Mohammed Shiraz Reyes. In early November of 2023, father of 3, Mohammed Shiraz Reyes, was jailed for 14 months at Minshull Street Crown Court in Manchester, England, after admitting a series of disturbing incidents on 2 flights back to Britain. The first occurred on July the 15th of 2019 when Reyes was on a Ryanair Boeing 737 flying into Liverpool John Lennon Airport from Morocco. After a number of whiskey and coke drinks, Reyes started verbally abusing flight attendant Milena Bogojevska. He insulted and fat-shamed the woman when she refused to give him more alcohol. Reyes continued to humiliate Bogojevska and had become so disruptive that the crew were forced to remove other passengers from his vicinity. It would later emerge that Reyes from Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, had over 30 offences on his record from incidents related to him being intoxicated. After the plane touched down, passengers applauded when law enforcement arrived to remove Reyes. The man reportedly stormed down the aisle, presented his wrists to officers, but maintained he hadn't done anything wrong. He continued behaving aggressively in the back of the police vehicle and allegedly bit an officer in the arm when they tried to restrain him. During his police interview, Reyes blamed his behavior on mixing alcohol with tramadol and 2 ibuprofen tablets. On January the 2nd of 2021, Reyes was returning from Istanbul to Manchester when he displayed similarly troublesome behavior. He danced and shadowboxed in the aisles, refused to wear his face mask, and punched other passengers' seats. Most of those on board were families with children. The police arrested and handcuffed Reyes after the plane landed and before taking him through border control, whereupon he verbally abused a female border agent. The passenger from hell, as Reyes would come to be known in the media, squared off against another passenger at passport control and continued using foul language in the presence of young children. As he was being led to the police van, Reyes yelled out, "No wonder it's so easy for us," and continued by saying to abuse your white children and white women, before stating that white men were weak. After failing to appear in court by claiming he had COVID-19, Reyes eventually admitted being drunk on an aircraft, assaulting an emergency worker, and 4 charges of using threatening behavior. He wasn't, however, charged with any racially aggravated offenses. Number 7. Vadim Bondar. While on an Aeroflot flight from Bangkok to Moscow, Russian anesthetist Vadim Bondar, aged 43, became foul-mouthed and violent and had to be restrained until the aircraft reached its destination. Even though the airline banned alcohol in economy class on the route, Bondar overindulged in rum that he had in his possession. For several hours into the flight, he reportedly became loud and aggressive, threatening and humiliating flight attendants. He ignored attempts from crew and passengers to calm him down. Bondar at one point tried to open the emergency exit, but was overpowered and stopped by 2 male passengers. They then assisted the crew in restraining the media-dubbed air hooligan who was tied up with seatbelts for the remainder of the flight, which was roughly 4 hours. 2 bottles of alcohol were confiscated from him. After being bound, Bondar began sobbing and claiming that he couldn't breathe. He was later handed over to the police in Moscow. In the aftermath, he apologized for causing inconvenience, admitting that he drank alcohol while the plane was going through turbulence. He also expressed an intention of seeking legal counsel for his treatment on the flight. Bondar told a Russian TV channel that the belt was cutting into his larynx and jugular vein, making it hard for him to breathe. He also claimed that over $1,200 in cash was missing from his hand luggage and that he'd been injected with unknown medication. Number 6. Carlene Gearing. Arizona woman Carlene Gearing, aged 21, was taken into custody by Las Vegas officers at McCarran International Airport in late September of 2021. The young woman had flown into a fit of rage and became belligerent towards Southwest Airlines employees after she wasn't allowed to board a flight. As reported by a supervisor, Gearing was denied rebooking a flight because of her behavior. The arrival of law enforcement did little to quell the woman's outburst as she began yelling, spitting, and kicking at officers. The police placed a spit mask on her and had to switch to flex cuffs as Gearing kept slipping out of her metal restraints. Officers detected a strong odor of alcohol emanating from her, and she was medically cleared prior to being booked at Clark County Detention Center on charges of battery on a protected person, resisting a public officer, and violating airport rules and regulations. Number 5. Cameron Gibson. A plane that was about to take off from Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport on May the 29th of 2023 was forced to return to the gate because of the violent outbursts of a passenger. During her inebriated antics, 25-year-old Kansas woman Cameron Gibson was reported to have kicked another passenger in the head while putting her feet up on the seat in front of her. Deputies were called as the pilots taxied the aircraft to the gate. A TikTok video of Gibson's interaction with law enforcement subsequently went viral. The young woman told the officers, "I literally need my phone," adding moments later, "I'm literally so confused. What's happening?" After repeatedly asking her politely to get off the plane, the deputies yanked Gibson out of her seat and handcuffed her. She then started fighting them, and the physical altercation continued onto the jet bridge. Gibson kicked 2 officers and bit a third in the thigh before she was restrained in a wheelchair. She was moved to the police office at the airport and charged with 3 counts of battery of a police officer, disturbing the peace while drunk, 2 counts of resisting an officer, and criminal mischief. Number 4. S7 Airlines Incident. In July of 2015, a video was posted on YouTube of a passenger on S7 Airlines Flight 546 traveling from Hong Kong to Vladivostok, Russia, being physically restrained aboard the aircraft in the wake of him behaving inappropriately towards the cabin crew. The unnamed man was reportedly in an advanced state of intoxication. Witnesses stated that he'd repeatedly threatened and insulted the flight attendants, which triggered a violent response from others aboard the plane. The video would show him being attacked by at least 4 passengers who punched and kicked him to the floor. The man was bound with seatbelts and sticky tape prior to being left in the aisle for the remainder of the flight. He was subsequently arrested upon arriving in Russia. Number 3. Alexei Fursov. While on a flight out of Bangkok, Thailand in the fall of 2023, dual Russian-Australian citizen Alexei Fursov, aged 35, was sitting next to a man who was only identified as Andre. During the meal service, Fursov suddenly grabbed a metal fork and started frantically stabbing the other man. He inflicted puncture wounds to Andre's back, shoulder, and chest before he was led to the back of the plane and hogtied by crew members and other passengers. It would later emerge that Fursov had also had a knife and scissors concealed within his reach, although it wasn't clear if he'd used them in the attack. Andre survived the stabbing and was given first aid aboard the plane. Passenger video showed the bound Fursov as he downplayed his actions and bizarrely motivated the attack by saying he thought Andre was going to bite him. Fursov added, "I thought I'd just poke him and he'd disappear." Another passenger then sarcastically remarked, "Like a balloon bursting," and Fursov acquiesced. Before the plane reached Moscow, passengers took turns watching the restrained man as he tried to free himself. Another video showed Fursov, who had a dazed look on his face, being led out of the plane by Russian police. Number 2. Gudmunda Karl Arthurson. In early January of 2013, civil engineer Gudmunda Karl Arthurson was on an Iceland Air flight from his native country to the Caribbean, where he was supposed to be met by his fiancée. 47-year-old Arthurson had visited family in Reykjavik for the winter holidays and was meant to catch a connecting flight out of JFK Airport in New York City. The man drank most of his duty-free alcohol, which consisted of Grand Marnier, whiskey, and schnapps, while on board. 2 hours into the flight, he became extremely rowdy. Some of his antics included groping 2 women who were sitting next to him and screaming that the plane was going to crash. He also randomly spat on passengers and started choking a male flyer without provocation. Arthurson was eventually duct taped to his seat by the flight crew and other passengers, with his arms and even his mouth bound. A photo was taken of the restrained Arthurson, and it earned attention online, in addition to being featured on the cover of the New York Post with the title, "The Guy in 23C Wants Another Drink." The actions of the flight crew, while arguably necessary in the moment, were criticized, given the fact that the man could have choked if he'd vomited and wouldn't have been able to react in case of an emergency. Upon arriving at JFK, Arthurson was rushed to a Queens hospital where he was treated for alcohol poisoning. Updates indicated that federal authorities had declined to prosecute the case. Number 1. Maxim G. In the summer of 2016, a passenger on a domestic Aeroflot flight from Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, a city on an island in the Russian Far East, to Moscow, went on a drunken rampage and wouldn't calm down, even after he was spoken to by the captain. The feral flyer, only identified as Maxim G, refused to return to his seat in spite of repeated pleas from the flight crew. He eventually lost his temper and punched a flight attendant in the face. In the moments that followed, staff and passengers worked together to overpower Maxim. They tied his hands behind his back with duct tape from the galley and then strapped him into a flight attendant's seat far from the other passengers. A clip, which subsequently went viral, showed Maxim swearing at the members of the cabin crew and challenging them to a fistfight. In spite of being restrained, he was recorded saying, "Come on, punch me, come on, you can do it, can't you? Punch me hard." Officers were waiting for the plane on the runway, whereupon they took Maxim into custody. Thanks for watching.